Florence is a city of art, light, and centuries-old beauty. Its streets carry the footsteps of poets and painters, the breath of ancient churches, and the whisper of slow, moving rivers. But beauty has always carried shadows. And between 1968 and 1985, a darkness walked those hills, a darkness that hunted under the veil of Tuscan moonlight, methodical, patient, and silent. They would later name him the Monster of Florence. But before that title was born, before fear became a second language in the countryside, it began with the simple, innocent habit that many young lovers cherished, driving out to the rural hills for privacy. On a quiet summer night in 1968, the city had just finished celebrating a festival. Couples walked hand in hand across cobblestone squares. The lights of Florence glowed gold under a warm sky. Far from the city, in the village of Signa, a young couple parked their car near the tall grass. They were alone, or so they thought. Hours later, when the sun rose, a local farmer discovered something that would never leave his memory: two lifeless bodies, a shattered window, and a scene so brutal that even seasoned police officers struggled to speak. At first, investigators believed it was a simple crime of passion, a jealous husband perhaps, an angry lover. Florence had no shortage of romantic disputes, but something was unusual. The killer had left no footprints, no fingerprints, no weapon, no sign of robbery. He had come with purpose. He had left with silence. The investigation ended abruptly when a suspect was arrested and convicted, the case seemingly closed. The city exhaled, but evil, as Florence would learn, is not so easily caged. Years passed. Tourists flooded the piazzas. Life returned to routine, but on June 6, 1981, the monster returned. That night, a couple parked by the woods of Scandixi, enjoying the privacy that darkness granted. They never saw the shadowed figure approaching from behind the trees. He fired through the windows, each shot precise, controlled. And then, as always, he vanished into the night, leaving behind terror that spread through Florence like winter frost. When police arrived, they were met with a horrible déjà vu. The wounds, the positioning, the gun used, it all mirrored the 1968 killings. The case that they believed had ended 13 years earlier had just been reopened by a phantom. Word traveled fast. Newspapers printed warnings. Radio stations broadcast the fear that now clung to the hills. Parents begged their children to stay home. Lovers chose lit streets instead of secluded fields. But Florence is a city built on romance, and young hearts rarely obey fear for long, and the monster knew it. In October of the same year, the killer struck again near Calanzano. Another couple, another moonlit murder, again not a single trace, the same caliber bullets, the same surgical precision. Police realized they were not hunting a reckless murderer. They were hunting someone who planned, analyzed, and executed with the intelligence of a predator who studied both humans and investigators. He understood fear. He shaped it. Detectives Giovanni Fabbri and Salvatore Renzi, two of the lead investigators, spent nights buried in evidence, photographs, reports, maps covered in pins and strings. They tried to enter the mind of the killer, but it was like stepping into a labyrinth with no walls, because the monster left nothing behind except bodies and nightmares. Their frustration grew, not because they lacked effort, but because they faced someone who anticipated every mistake they might exploit, someone who observed from the shadows, invisible, patient. Meanwhile, Florence's people began to change. Doors that had once stayed unlocked were now barricaded with double locks. Couples avoided deserted roads. Even the countryside, which once smelled of fresh grapes and blooming olive trees, now carried an invisible tension. The monster didn't just kill people, he killed the innocence of a generation. 1982 brought another attack, same pattern, same precision. Police created roadblocks, interrogated hunters, questioned military personnel, investigated jealous lovers, and searched hundreds of homes. They found nothing. Officers began to suspect that the killer might be someone who blended perfectly into society, someone who had a normal life during the day and transformed into a predator at night. Theories swirled like smoke. Some believed it was a former soldier with training, others whispered about a doctor gone mad, some even believed it was more than one killer, working together like hunters around prey. But without evidence, all they had were guesses, and guesses don't catch monsters. In September 1983, another couple was found dead. The city's panic deepened. The pattern was too perfect, too ritualistic. The killer seemed to be evolving, as though each murder was a step in a plan only he understood. Newspapers gave him his name, Il Mostro di Florence, the Monster of Florence, and with that name his legend began to grow. More detectives were assigned, psychologists were brought in from Rome, foreign experts were consulted, but the monster was always one step ahead. He watched, he waited, and when the police presence grew heavy in one area, he simply moved to another. One officer wrote in his journal, "It's like he can smell us." Then came 1984. A couple from Germany had been camping near the woods. They had traveled to Italy for its beauty, unaware of the shadow that haunted the countryside. Their tent was found torn open, their bodies killed with the same weapon as before. But this time the killer had done something even more vicious, as if he wanted to send a message, and he did. Later that week, a small package arrived at the police station. Inside was a macabre trophy taken from one of the victims, wrapped with precision and mailed like a letter. The monster was mocking them. This changed everything. What had once been thought to be a cold, calculating predator was now clearly someone who wanted recognition, someone who felt untouchable, someone who enjoyed the game. The media exploded with fear and fascination. Tourists cancelled trips, locals avoided the hills, police doubled their efforts, but the investigation began collapsing under its own weight. Too many suspects, too many theories, too many false leads. Innocent men were arrested, interrogated, and publicly shamed. One was even imprisoned, later proven innocent, but his life was destroyed. The monster didn't just kill physically, he destroyed reputations and trust. 1985 approached with dread. Everyone knew he would strike again. It wasn't a question of if, but when. On September 8, 1985, a couple parked near San Cassiano for a quiet evening. They never returned home. Their car was discovered in the morning, windows shattered, bodies inside, but something was different this time. Some witnesses reported seeing a mysterious man lurking around the area days before. Others claimed a strange car had been parked nearby. For the first time, police felt close, like they were brushing the edge of the monster's cloak, but again he slipped away. After this final known murder, something changed. The monster vanished. Like a shadow dissolving into morning light, he ceased his attacks. No more killings, no more letters, no more clues. Florence slept more peacefully, but the peace felt fragile, as if the city knew the monster was still out there alive, aging, watching quietly. Years turned into decades. Investigators retired. New detectives inherited boxes of evidence that felt like relics of a curse. Some insisted the killer must have died. Others believed he was imprisoned for a different crime. Some thought he simply chose to stop, but the truth remained hidden inside the silence he left behind. Journalists investigated the case obsessively, FBI profilers visited Italy, authors wrote books about the monster, each with their own theories. Some accused secret societies, others pointed to deranged hunters. At one point, suspicion even fell on a well-known doctor who had lived near the crime scenes, but evidence was never enough. Another man was arrested years later, but doubts surrounded the case. Some believed he was innocent, a scapegoat chosen because the police needed closure. And through all of it, the Monster of Florence loomed like a ghost above the hills, unfinished, unresolved, unforgettable. The case remains officially unsolved. Over the years, the forests and fields where the killings occurred have grown thicker. The old parking spots where couples once sat are now avoided by locals. Even today, some Florentines refuse to drive into the countryside at night. The legend of the monster still breathes in the spaces between trees, in the cracks of lonely roads, in the quiet rustling of wind against grass. Tourists rarely hear about it. Guides prefer the stories of Michelangelo and Dante, tales of beauty and brilliance, not of terror. But if you wander outside the city at dusk, and if you ask the older residents, they will tell you what their parents told them. Never park your car in the hills after dark. Never assume you're alone. Because some monsters don't live in fairy tales, some walk beneath moonlight, and some never get caught. The Monster of Florence is one of them. To this day, the identity of the killer remains unknown. No fingerprints, no DNA, no confession, just shadows, silence, and the memory of fear that once gripped a city of art and beauty. For nearly 2 decades, he stalked couples without leaving a trace. And for 40 years since, he has remained nothing more than a whisper, a nightmare, a name spoken quietly in the old villages of Tuscany. The monster became a symbol of mystery, of darkness hiding behind beauty, of evil that wears no face. A faceless terror that haunted a generation and continues to haunt the pages of history. Florence has healed, but it has not forgotten. There are still nights when the wind carries strange sounds through the olive fields, and locals close their shutters early, remembering a time when a hunter walked the hills and no one knew his name. Perhaps he died long ago. Perhaps he grew old in a small house, surrounded by neighbors who never suspected a thing. Or perhaps he still lives, an old man with quiet eyes, passing people on the street who never realize they are brushing shoulders with a legend of terror. No one knows, and that is what makes the story live on, because monsters that have names can be feared, but monsters that remain unknown can never truly die.